Hello, everyone. Welcome to Feedstuffs 365. I'm Sarah Muirhead. Joining us today with a look at the weather is meteorologist Greg Soulje. And we're going to take a look at the remainder of this summer,
Yep.
maybe a little fall outlook, Greg, and maybe you're going to even give us a little tease into what winter might look like here in those first few months. So
Yeah.
look forward to all of that.
Yeah. Lots to talk about on what's been so far so good, surprisingly. A pretty decent crop growing season by and large. Pasture lands, rangelands, central and southern plains, vastly improved. Obviously, the cleanup and recovery down through central and south Texas. Tropics, from our perspective, as you and I have talked about here, still look to be fairly quiet. We've got a little something trying to cook up again over the northeastern Gulf that may more or less just be a pretty substantial rainmaker. Will come into play in the Midwest with time. And that's pretty much it. Yeah, we'll talk about the fall outlook. Looks pretty good for an early harvest, and a couple of comments on the wintertime season. We're just beginning to put that together, but some probably more significant, better than usual confidence in all this longer range stuff going forward here in the months to come.
Very good. For those of you that are tuning in, we've got Greg here with us live. So if you have any questions, feel free to post those in the chat or post those in your social media channel, and we'll make sure to get those to him. So, Greg, why don't you go ahead? I see your slides are up.
Yes, and off we go. Much like when we do these updates on Tuesdays and Fridays, got to lay the groundwork before we can go deeper on into laying out the medium and longer range stuff. And yeah, there's still rain on the northern plains. There's still the likelihood of some organized, decent, respectable rains across the Corn Belt. Still a little work to go on dryness and drought. We'll take a look at a comparison map from March to the drought monitor from late last week, and yeah, making some good inroads. And when we do get into a drier, slightly more droughty-ish scenario, it will certainly work to our benefit from an early harvest standpoint in the Corn Belt. Plain states will have to keep an eye out for maybe some worsening pasture lands with time into areas of Nebraska and points north and west from there. But in any event, scattered showers, thunderstorms on the northern plains, and they're moving to the northern and western Corn Belt locales with time. Pasture lands are vastly improved. It's this time of the year when you get severe weather, and we'll probably see it up across the Dakotas, Minnesota, northern Wisconsin. It is what it is, and those plain states areas still through areas of Montana, the western Dakotas are still very short on topsoil moisture at about 71% or so. But again, of late, some general improvement in the parts of the Big Sky country. It's the heat and humidity across the Corn Belt. Happened to stumble across someone doing a live feed from a cornfield somewhere in the Midwest, the corn above his height, kind of playing up the fact that was going to be a heat wave weather pattern, and crops don't like the heat and all that kind of Armageddonish kind of stuff. But we're not looking at a lot of days. The critical temperature is usually about 95, and usually a drier soil base might cause a little leaf wilt. So maybe northern Illinois, parts of southern Wisconsin, some drier patches through Indiana and Michigan. Not a big deal. Most of these days are going to be featuring just oppressive humidity levels. When we talk about this, you feel the humidity in the air, if you will, the average person with a dew point of about 60, 65. We've got dew points up already as far north as Chicago, Danville, Champaign, to east of St. Louis at 80 to 81 degrees. That is a lot of that corn moisture going back into even daytime hours into the atmosphere. And you can see that channeling effect on the visible satellite picture of the shower activity, at least not shower activity, but building cumulus clouds over Illinois and Indiana. A lot of meteorology there, but the bottom line is not a long-lasting heat wave. It's more humidity-based with high heat index values. Corn's going to be a little bit tired, I think, at night. It'll be going away 24/7 in these nighttime lows of 75 to 80 degrees. But there's a cold front up to the north. It's on the move, and behind that front, temperatures are in the 70s and 80s. That front is coming southward. It may ultimately kind of beat down the top of the hot ridge over parts of the Midwest. So yeah, it's nice to see the great stands of corn out there and soybeans, and 95 a little bit touchy for some of the crops still going through reproductive stages, but it's not a big deal. It's not a market maker, not going to make headlines, and there's more rain in the forecast. The bigger headlines are probably going to be when we do generate rain, it will likely be severe, as in the storm stuff. So we've got to watch for the lodging, the green snap, the blowdown, Farm Futures had a nice article a couple of weeks ago, I believe, on this is the time of year. Great looking stands, and all of a sudden you get a storm that comes through. You get a nice half inch to an inch of rain, but everything's flattened on out. And you're making phone calls to your guy to get your inputs ready to go for harvest season. On the south, hot weather. Cotton loves it. Scattered showers and thunderstorms cropping up. There's a little ill-defined circulation off of Pensacola. It's not going to become anything named. It's much like the one that came ashore and through New Orleans about a week or 10 days ago. Hot weather, tough weather for outdoor work across the Mississippi Delta into areas of the Carolinas and Georgia. Those dew points are up between 75 and 80, just like we have here. The hot ridge is more established in the Tennessee Valley, but we're actually able to make cumuliform clouds in it on the visible satellite picture. That tells me that we're able, even with the warm, stacked up atmosphere, we can get a little upward momentum going already. It's not just completely clear, sunny, and a light wind component. We've got the light wind component, but skies are clouding up, and that's a good sign that we're able to cool the atmosphere, get the right mechanisms. We're going to make rain. So the dryness and drought thing continues to be falling by the wayside, even on the bigger picture for now. And when it gets going, we'll talk about that later in the get together here. It will be of benefit, he tries to say, getting crops to maturity and into probably an early and often harvest mode for many areas. Northern areas might be a little bit touchy, but we'll touch on that in a second. Fires are the story in through southern Oregon or northern Oregon, southern Washington, and near the California line as well. I believe the Madras, Oregon fires at about 100,000 acres, 10,000 acres now around the just north of the Columbia River in Washington state. So that's the problem with dry-based thunderstorms. You get lightning, you get into that fuel, if you will, and you're off to the races with fire potential. Monsoon for now, season in the Arizona and New Mexico is temporarily wound down. It will get going once we reestablish the ridge back westward into the middle part of the country next week. There's the focal point of the heat coming up far southern and southwestern Corn Belt down across Dixie in the southeastern states, not building northward. It will retrogress with time back to the west. And when that happens, again, we're worried about strengthening winds up aloft, and the northern and eastern flank of that ridge usually have thunderstorm activity with it, and hence got to keep an eye on this derecho thing getting going over the weekend and next week over the northern and eastern Corn Belt. But for poultry operations, livestock operations, outdoor workers from the southeastern plains to the Delta and points on east, it will be pretty tough with frequent heat index values for the next several days, probably the next week to 10 days of 95 to 105, some spots pushing 110 to 115. That's dangerous. That is a off the chart heat index value. And the areas of red are the heat advisories all the way up into Wisconsin, Iowa, Eastern Corn Belt. The red areas running from about, or at least purple, if you will, from about St. Louis on southward into the lower Mississippi Valley Delta region. Flood watches and warnings in the northwest Wisconsin and the Arrowhead of Minnesota. They had 3 to 6 inches of rain there the past week to 10 days, and another 1 to 3 coming through right now. Those fronts are headed southward to at least the southern Great Lakes areas and the I-80 corridor of the Corn Belt in the coming days. Rest of the afternoon, we just talked about it. There's a little moisture, cumuliform clouds are forming up, and I wouldn't be surprised. A couple of spotty showers in parts of Illinois, maybe a weak thunderstorm. Most of the organized rains are in 2 areas, and again, those showers that you see in Tennessee and Illinois, that's the hot ridge, and we're able to cool it right now and make clouds. Well, that doesn't tell me this is going to last much longer, and we're going to get into some active weather and get some more rain back in the forecast. The dryness word is not evident outside of what's lingering in parts of Illinois and Wisconsin. I think we're going to even make amends there in the coming couple of weeks. Rain down through Florida, easing up the drought situation there into the night. That front has widespread showers and thunderstorms from hip hooray, Nebraska, Iowa, Minnesota, the still drier areas of the Corn Belt into the upper Midwest. Back outside the Black Hills, and some of those storms into West Texas, cotton country could be locally stronger or severe, more lightning than anything, more hail than anything, and pretty good drenching rains along the Gulf Coast. Again, there's something trying to cook down there. We'll take a look at the tropical update in just a second. Scattered showers and thunderstorms northern and western Corn Belt tomorrow morning, still lingering central and eastern Gulf Coast. The sea breeze fronts will get going and pick up the rain in the afternoon down through Florida. And there's rain in the forecast for the rest of Iowa, eastern Nebraska, certain ice places here in Illinois, we're going to put the rain gauges out ready to go with probably 0.5 to 1 on the conservative side. There might be some 1 to 2 inch downpours on the higher side where storms can kind of recur and repeat from northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin, worst of the dry drought in quote areas into Michigan. We're going to take care of that as well. That frontal boundary forecast to then pick up the rains into the eastern Corn Belt areas on Friday. The front begins to stall on out, and we'll get a couple of more disturbances over the top. We'll talk about that in a second. Next 48 hours, yep, that's nice. Great looking rains. Western Corn Belt, Northern Corn Belt, central parts of and northern parts of Illinois. Rain on the plains too, where we need it. Nebraska, in through Kansas. Still, there's virtually no dryness or drought. Some dry areas showing up, but no drought in most of Oklahoma and Kansas. There's been a general drying trend there, and the organized rains continue down through Florida. Quick look at temperatures by tomorrow morning. These are forecast lows. Again, the higher values at night are because of high dew point air, corn sweat, 75 to 80 in those shades of red through Wisconsin, Michigan, northern Illinois. They taper back a little bit back into the plain states in slightly drier air. Fire potential still continues southern Oregon into the northern Sierra. That has kind of wound down from what it was over the past couple of 2 or 3 weeks. Severe weather this afternoon, Nebraska, Minnesota, and in through Wisconsin. Going forward, moisture from a variety of sources. That's certainly well stated on the write-ups of this morning out of the southwest. Moisture pooling along these fronts in the northern plains. Gulf moisture in the grounds out of the Mississippi Valley working northward, and moisture from corn plants, the corn sweat thing at night. All of that adding up to impacting showers and thunderstorms around this hot ridge of high pressure, which is not anything to make headlines and to go stand out in the cornfield and talk about. We're going to break it down here easily with a pretty wide swath here of the next 5 days of 1 to 3 inch rains. The severe element has to be watched. That's the bigger headline going forward out of the northern plains, central plains with time, across the Corn Belt areas to the Gulf Coast areas. All along the Gulf Coast, some significant rain. The basic hot, dry weather is parked over the southern plains, parts of the Mid-South. That is a small epicenter of that hot, what we call 594 ridge. And it's not forecast to really strengthen a whole lot, and it will make a retrogression with time back into the Great Plains, and we'll take a look at that in just a second. High temperatures going forward for the day on Thursday. You can see readings maybe 92 to 96 degrees, northern Illinois, parts of central Illinois, northern Indiana, Michigan. It's relatively short-lived by the time we get into Monday next week. Low 90s. That's par for the course stuff for mid to late July in the eastern Corn Belt. The heat reestablishes itself back west and through some of livestock country into Nebraska and Kansas, and even down through the poultry areas of the Delta and Deep South. Pretty typical July weather, a few degrees above average, but nothing to send off bells and whistles and alarms as well. Pardon me. The hazards, if you will, going forward will be rain and probably the severe end. Nobody talks about it. Except for that great article in Farm Futures for the northern plains, Minnesota, and look at the expanse of significant rains in the forecast for much of the Corn Belt, parts of the eastern plains. Otherwise, it is basically heat and more humidity than anything, with high heat index values going forward. The tropics, a couple of areas to look at. You can see a few bright white clouds, the western Atlantic, inconsequential. You can see virtually nothing of organization to the cloud masses coming off the African coast. That's the landmass that you see to the bottom right. And it's likely to stay that way for the foreseeable future. Nothing on a significant, ramped up, typical, classic basis until I think we get into the back end of August, if not September. And then it will be off to the races. There's one little suspect area, much like we had here about a week to 10 days ago, that cut across Florida, moved into the central Gulf, and then just picked up rainfall chances. And there's another perspective of it out in through areas of the northeastern parts of Florida offshore. The folks at the Weather Service are going to send an Air Force reconnaissance planes out there this afternoon to take a look at it. And it's basically going to be on a westward move. We'll take a look at the forecast positions in just a second. It's probably more active in the Pacific. And like we've been talking about, we still see signs of an El Nino going on around here. It's not a neutral state. Probably won't get into a neutral state for the next probably 6 weeks or so. And so the beat goes on in this sort of El Nino-ish opportunity making setup of rainfall in areas across the heartland. The Pacific is probably going to be more active than the Atlantic basin will be. And by the way, this is what the Weather Service kicked out back in the month of May, that is, and the number of storms. And I don't think we're going to get anywhere near this. It'll be a compact one after another season, late August, September, October, and then we wind it down. We probably will linger some semblance of tropical systems in the Western Atlantic into October, even November, perhaps even early December this year, and go forward from there. The near normal tropical season continues on in the Pacific Basin, but nowhere near so far from what we were anticipating out there in the, at least the folks of the National Weather Service were expecting out in the Atlantic Basin. This was the March drought monitor. Here is the drought monitor from July 15th. Yeah, some drier areas, but even from our conversations with radio people in central and east central Illinois, northern Indiana, on some of the bigger radio feeds we do, there's no big headlines. There's maybe at worst a little leaf wilt going on. Everything looking good. There's been no major detriment to pollination, silking, flowering, pot setting, wherever you may be, because there's a range of generally early to mid season varieties out there, and they are ahead of the game in many to most locales. So don't think it's going to be any big headline story. And there's rain coming too for Illinois, northern Indiana, and Michigan. The Plain States as well have seen improvement into Nebraska, some areas, some worsening in through northern Kansas. I don't think that's anything to write home about now. Later on, deeper into the waning weeks of summer and autumn, I think we'll be probably look at a reestablishment of dryness and drought, and a teleconnection of that out of the Southwest into the Plain States areas too. But that will pass. The winter, late autumn, and winter outlook is let the cat out of the bag, is showing up with a lot of moisture in one form or another going forward. Going to have to wait till probably Thanksgiving, or even more likely to the mid stretch of the month of December. And I think by then, everyone ought to be wrapped up from a harvest standpoint. And I dare say we get a couple of more rains, the crop is made in the Corn Belt areas. We're going to go online, and I think we've talked about that already, that and we've done it on radio. And I think the crop is already made. It will be made. There's rain coming. Just stay away from the severe end of it, and we'll be okay. Saturday, Sunday, Monday, the H is over the Carolinas. It's weakening. There's a little wiggle or dent in that high. That's a couple of little tropical features making their way out of the Western Atlantic through the Northern Gulf, moving inland to Texas. Again, unfortunately, lower Mississippi Valley, Gulf Coast. You can see the H that starts offshore out through the Outer Banks. Then by Sunday, Monday, it's moved from the Tennessee Valley into the Central Plains. Then by Tuesday, Wednesday next week, there it is. It's moved all the way westward into the Great Plains. And under that H over the western flank, that's the hottest temperatures. And you can see those green lines are strengthening. There's a pretty good kink in them as well relative to late July in the southeastern and eastern parts of Canada. There's your stronger wind profile. Storms get going in the northern and eastern flank at that high. And that's why we're a little concerned that when we do get enough energy or little waves to come on through, some of those storms are going to be primarily wind and hail makers. In any event, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, fronts drop in. They hit the skids at about the I-80 corridor, classic clusters of showers and thunderstorms, classic mid to late July setup. And we get into late July, August. That's where some of the folks through the Central Plains and Corn Belt set records for rainfall totals. That because storms just sit there and rain themselves out. They don't get a lot of movement unless you're in that jet stream pattern, which will come out of the Dakotas into the upper Great Lakes region. Storm chances do increase. We'll bust the atmospheric cap mid to late next week, and through Oklahoma, Kansas, they tend to be all or nothing, but it's rain in the forecast there. So it's still the forecast over a bunch of the heartland. So the dryness and drought related issues continue to fall by the wayside by our estimates for now. We'll talk about that when it does come to fruition in just a minute. Next 7 days, look, pick your total. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 inches of rain coming out of the upper Midwest. Good coverage is expected through Kansas, the Oklahoma Panhandle, and through Nebraska. Pasture lands will help that too. And if you can get into some of that rain cool there, that should take the edge off at least temperatures at some point mid to late next week for those livestock operations. Moisture coming up out of Old Mexico, some in Baja, across the Gulf of Mexico as well. Something in the Gulf of Mexico, but that is of a more rain-induced system, not your typical named tropical storm or hurricanes. Next 6 to 10 day outlook again again, pardon me for the incorrect date there, but this is the correct map. The high is over the middle part of the country. That trough is over the northeastern part of the country. Systems ride the ridge. They drop south and east. It's the classic ring of fire setup, and storms will run on the outermost band or innermost band of that high out of the Black Hills to St. Louis and down into the Mid-South, and where those lines separate. That's the divergent flow, and that's where we kind of get these storms to kind of ramp up in their hail and high wind issues. The next 6 to 10 days, the heat breaks down, retrogrades into the plains and parts of the Pacific Northwest. There's the outlook for wet weather. It's at least normal moisture for the Corn Belt, wetter than average Montana and the northern and central plains. This is the government cranking out the model forecast, and there's no deviation from what we see on some of our charts that we put together, kind of our own proprietary way of doing forecasting. And the wetter trend continues over the eastern states. There's the outlook. Again, screwed up on the date, pardon me there, but this is the correct map out the next 2 weeks. And this is almost a classic, typical textbook, the way it ought to look for late July, early August on the upper air configuration. We've got to watch for dry-based thunderstorms in Northern California, lightning potential out there, Pacific Northwest. The ring of fire sets up. Somebody comes up with these active storm clusters late night, early morning, then redevelopment late afternoon, early evening, and they just ride the crest of the ridge from the northern plains into the Corn Belt locales. And a little overdone, a little over exuberant. We're not into this degree of cooling into the northeast of New England, but there's a drop off in temperatures at least back to normal, maybe a little below, but nothing to impact crop growth and development going out into the early days of the month of August. Heat across the west and down through the south, and that continues to show we have no disagreement on this. Maybe a little bit overdone on the drier spell, but it's short-lived out of the Great Lakes region into the Northeast and New England. So, Sarah, that is the groundwork, and you probably know where we're going from here, I think, from the rest of the summertime and the autumn outlook going forward around here, from at least the way we see things on This Week in Agribusiness and VStuff 365. And so it goes.
Very good. Yeah, it seems like things are in order, but what's ahead for the rest of the summer? You're talking real kind of short term right now, but let's look a little longer term.
And we'll get into the fall outlook as well, but let's finish up the rest of the summer. And yeah, there it is. It's still a weak El Nino, and this is for the month of August, where we think the bulk of the heat. And we may get some perturbations of the heat farther east into the Corn Belt, but it's likely to stay in the plains. So livestock managers, bin and barn operators, ready for probably a little more typical midsummer feel. There's probably some triple-digit heat involved into those high plains areas of Nebraska, Colorado, and Kansas. A little below average for the Northeast in New England, and about normal to a little above over the rest of the Corn Belt. We're gonna get this crop done in a hurry. Problems maybe in the southern plains. Temperatures about normal down through poultry areas and the Cotton Belt areas of the country. So the headlines are really going to be across the Great Basin, the Divide, and probably suspect with maybe some fire potential. While the tendency for moisture in systems is going to be a little above average, there's going to be a higher than usual propensity for fires. Northern California, Pacific Northwest, Northern Rockies, maybe building into the Northern Great Basin and Central Rockies. It's still a weak El Nino going through the rest of the month of August. And we've got really two areas of things to watch out for. Probably the Gulf of Mexico is where something's going to come out, or the far southwestern Atlantic. But if it comes out of the southwestern Atlantic, anything that does form western Bermuda is going to be probably sheared off by that jet stream driving south and southeast. Nonetheless, there's probably more than higher than usual likelihood of some active storm clusters, a little above average moisture, northern and eastern Corn Belt, right up the middle through the Mississippi Valley, and the drier trend continues on. As we've been saying for weeks and months around here, back west of the Missouri River. So, Sarah, there's the rest of the summertime season around here. No big headlines. It's pretty much cross the T's, dot the I's, and we've got the fall forecast, and we'll make a couple of comments about the upcoming wintertime season. Maybe as we get together in our August date, we'll maybe put a few bullet points together and have that winter outlook to go probably at some point when we get together in September.
Now, Greg, you've kind of been talking drought in some cases, but you're kind of saying it might be well timed in the fall, or are we still on that, or where are we at in that? So go ahead and walk us through what's ahead.
Yeah, here we go in September, and no big headlines on temperatures. We push things to maturity, continue to rack up growing degree day units. If you are out there with an early opportunity of planning, moisture reduction, dry down, all in the cards. Temperatures about normal through the northern and eastern Corn Belt. We're kind of locking into what the pattern should have been by some estimates and forecasts, maybe about 3 or 4 or 5 months ago. We're going to finally lock into it going forward, as will be of benefit to many folks, I think. Plain states, again, the livestock operations might be a little touchy with heat-related issues and expanding and maybe teleconnecting dryness and drought out of the Southwest into parts of Nebraska, Colorado that are still dealing with that element of it with pasture lands and livestock operations in mind. The wetter trend is really based on something coming out of the southwestern and western Atlantic. If it doesn't, there's probably a more significant push of that below average moisture through all of the Corn Belt, except for maybe far eastern Michigan and Ohio. Trend those guys closer to normal, and everyone else is below normal. The only active weather stays up near the Canadian border. So again, moisture reduction, dry down values, crop maturity, looking good in September. October, there's still an element of heat in the forecast. Again, some of those livestock areas of the high plains, watch it with readings in the central parts of the Rockies and Great Basin area. What's left of snow cover is certainly gone by then. We'll have to keep an eye on water requirements in the Southwest with irrigation in mind. Now, there's a little lobe of cool air rotating southward. And whenever we get systems to kind of come up like this, we draw, if we were to go back and take a look at temperatures, we get a little concerned that we're going to tug down maybe an early, quick, non-threatening, non-damaging frost. That is very much in the cards. A little ill-defined at this point, but the right setup, if we can get something to stay together and come up through the Western Atlantic, not get sheared off, that could conceivably get a little quick shot of maybe early October, mid-October cold air, but it's not far off, even let's say late September to the mid stretch of October. Keep an eye on those calendar dates. It will not be a killing frost or freeze, but there could be a little nip out there. And if we don't get anything to come out of the Western Atlantic, and confidence is not great in getting things even to the Atlantic seaboard going into October from our vantage point. But in any event, drier than usual. Much of the central and southern plains livestock people plan on that accordingly. And if we don't get anything to come up through the Atlantic, there's a general trend towards normal and below on moisture in many Corn Belt areas, northern plains, big sky country, Pacific Northwest. That's good news. And I don't think there's any deviation based on what happens in the Atlantic basin on a tropical weather sense there. By the time we get to November, we're beginning to see more of a neutral state, and it's going to be more of a neutral state than going into early winter. The folks at the Weather Service, I think, are betting the cards on a quick and developing La Nina. These are not ping pong balls, as Dr. Clayton Rytan explained to us in dynamics class in Northern Illinois University back in 19 blah, blah, blah. The atmosphere takes time to change and transition. So we're still in a neutral state the way we see it, November and probably into the early wintertime season. There's a core of warmth there. There's some cold air on the move, but it's not anything of a big headline sense up near the Canadian border. What we'll likely see, and it's not far off climatological averages, our first snows of the season there. North of the St. Lawrence, up towards the James Bay, Hudson Bay area. Tropics are still kind of active. We think that they stay offshore, and there may be still some significant rains for areas of the eastern states and parts of the far northern and eastern Corn Belt could conceivably be if in harvest mode by then. I'm sure they are, and maybe some delays there. So nothing goes on in the Atlantic. Take that yellow area, expanded to about the Missouri up to the Black Hills, and maybe the corridor of wetter than average weather is focused in the far northern Great Lakes and the easternmost areas of the Corn Belt, where we still need some moisture for parts of Michigan. We're in good shape across Ohio. So that's the story from the weather office here, Sarah. Wintertime around here is based on early on. Nothing unusual if you were going to open up a climatological textbook and see what plays out. I think it's somewhere as we get into the usual December 15th or the holidays to the first week of January. And I think going forward from there will tend to be probably a little more busier, active, winter weather pattern focused on the eastern corn belt, more normalized to the west. But if you were shortened by any moisture, for example, during the fall or winter time or summer season, we think before the ground's firm and freeze on up, there should be some significant rains or some snows as well to make their way into the eastern corn belt. But probably looking a little busier into the eastern corn belt locales and getting a little more active character building as we get beyond the holiday season into January. But it's wintertime by then. And we're talking about, here we are in July talking about the winter outlook. So we don't have any headline elements driving the climate system. Probably beginning to take a little El Nino going into the mid stretch of wintertime. And when that happens, sometimes the weather pattern gets a little rambunctious from a wintertime standpoint, but we have plenty of opportunity to get the white out and the erasers out of the longer range forecast scheme of things. So that's it from the weather office. I think everyone should have a pretty much manageable rest of summertime and early and often harvest season. And if you're not done by Thanksgiving or sooner, don't call me. You were forewarned.
There we go. All right. We will catch up with Greg. We catch up with Greg twice a week, usually on Tuesdays and Fridays. So we'll catch up with Greg Friday. Actually,
Yep.
I was going to say next Tuesday, but we have a Friday in there first and get another short-term outlook. And then we do these longer-term outlooks once a month. So we will have Greg back with us in August to give us
Yep.
maybe another peek at what's ahead for the winter as well as into the harvest season. So
And on This Week in
that.
Agribusiness, we have that 4-week
Yep.
outlook, which kind of updates. So this kind of dovetails what we do on feedstuffs365.com and the TV show. We kind of dovetail them. So you're not going to see anything different from the TV show to here. It's just basically consistently turning the page to the next week. And if we can kind of dovetail, thinking and planning and outdoor work together and not have any big headlines, which is the way we like to forecast. And when there are headlines, we'll let you know. That's the approach we take between our venue here, radio, and This Week in Agribusiness.
Very good. Well, Greg, thank you so much. See you Friday. And thank you all for joining us as well. We appreciate it. For Feedstuffs, I'm Sarah Muirhead.